嗨嗨，我是秦惠博士，用大白话来帮你厘清复杂的碳权知识。不管企业是因为什么原因想要买碳权，当然都希望自己买的是好碳权、优质碳权，对吧？那要怎么找到又好又可靠又划算的优质碳权专案呢？毕竟一分钱一分货也是碳权市场里面活生生血淋淋的现实啊。但是碳权真的也跟鸡蛋一样，有机友善福利鸡蛋和普通随便养的鸡蛋，吃下去都会有饱足感，但是是绝对不一样的。所以咯，首先要先确认企业买碳权的目的在哪里，再来选择要买哪一种的碳权才是王道。至于呢，有公信力或是优质碳权要怎么找呢？其实啊，逻辑跟股票金融也是一样的。第一件事情就是先找有没有评级咯。当今世界上有四大评级机构，你看成立的年就知道说每一个都还很新。目前发展最早也是最快的是英国出身的 Sylvera， 它也是目前为止发展全球最大的自愿性碳权的评级机构。阿季也刚好有幸前阵子跟 Sylvera 的亚洲总监 Louis 有同台演讲的机会，阿季就厚颜情商了主办单位台湾碳权数位经济发展协会 TCDD 和Louis大大本人同意让我可以把他精彩的演讲配上中文字幕分享给更多的伙伴们。所以今天就要来跟你分享 Louis 从评级单位的角度是怎么样看自愿性碳权市场的发展，碳权价值链的创造和 Sylvera 是怎么样评价一个碳级专案的呢？话不多说，让我们正式进入正题吧。
Okay, Louis, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your patience, and thank you all for the warm welcome. It's my first time ever in Taiwan, and I have been very warmly welcomed. So thank you all. I am very happy to be here and very happy to be following Mr. Chong's presentation. And today I'm talking to you about carbon markets in a little bit more detail, and particularly how we can encourage more businesses and public sector entities to participate in climate change. And I want to start with a number that every time I look at it looks bigger and bigger. That is $125 trillion. A very, very big number that is estimated, that is needed to reach net zero as a global economy. So this is not just Taiwan, and this is globally. It's a big investment, it's a big number. However, I think it's very doable. It is a big challenge to get to net zero, and it's going to require a big change across the globe. It's going to change how we live, it's going to change our economies, and it's going to change our politics. Everything about the net zero economy is going to be transformation, in short. To give you an idea of the scale of what this represents, is that oil was first mechanically drilled in the 1850s, nearly 250 years ago. We have to scale carbon removal 50 times faster than they developed oil. To give you a better idea of this number, half a gigaton of oil was produced and put into the atmosphere in 90 years, 9 decades. We've got to go to 10 gigatons of removals in 30 years. So we have a big challenge, and it is one that we are all here to face, and I believe that everyone in this room is here to participate in. This is a very commonly used curve for net zero and how we are going to achieve it. Net zero is a pathway that we need to do so that we can actually have a planet that we can all live on, obviously. And at the moment, we are still on the upward trajectory of that net zero target. We're still emitting more than we should. And as I mentioned earlier, we all have to start considering net zero as part of our strategies. If you're a business leader, if you are a family member, an employee, a government representative, it doesn't matter who you are, it has to be part now of how you think about how you are going to move forward. Otherwise, we'll be left behind. And for Taiwan, this is specifically important given the importance and the remarkable progress you have made as a country over the last few decades. If you are to continue the forward momentum, then net zero has to be part of the thinking. So as I said, net zero is here to stay, and the policy situation is always changing. Mr. Hong, you mentioned earlier a few things about what is happening here in Taiwan, but it's happening everywhere. Whether it's the United Nations or your partner countries or your neighbors, they are all in some way changing policies that will bring them to net zero as well. And carbon markets is what I'm going to speak about more today. And that's how we can actually make sure we get to that net zero, because decarbonization and emissions avoidance is the priority. Then we have to start thinking about what do we do beyond this. If we cannot get to absolute zero emissions in our activities, how do we get to the net in net zero? So there remain some major challenges to be able to do this. As I said earlier, not only does net zero change the way we live, but it also changes where there is value. Where there is value today is in clean energy, is in better technologies, is in more advanced ways of working. So Taiwan has already done a great job at this, being able to be at that forward of technology. Now, how do you go beyond this into cleaner technology, efficient technology, and be able to be part of that change? As I said earlier, we have a number of different policies that are changing. This puts businesses at risk. You mentioned CBAM is a great one that could impact us, but also, in your everyday lives, the carbon tax that will come into place next year here in Taiwan will have an impact on the cost of things. And so there is a risk that we're all subject to if we do not react to evolving policies. And for carbon markets, and this is something that I am learning more and more about here in Taiwan as well, is that it's quite unclear about what we have to do. All right, you mentioned earlier all these rules that we have to put into place about what makes a project eligible. Why can we do a project here and there? There are difficult rules, and companies often don't have the information they need to be able to make these decisions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this in particular. My main focus will be about this area here. So carbon markets, as we move towards this net zero, are a way for everyday businesses and governments and even people to start investing in natural ecosystem, developing economies, and climate resilience. It is one of the cheapest ways for us to reach net zero, is by putting money where it's needed most. This is, for me, a really important element, because you would imagine that I work with big oil and gas companies, I work with governments, I work with big mining companies and manufacturing companies. That is true, but I also work with pharmaceuticals, I work with retail businesses, I work with individual people who are contributing to climate. Carbon markets is a way for everyone to participate in climate change mitigation. It is a way for businesses who are not specialists in forests, they can still participate. They can still show that they can put some money towards protecting a forest under REDD+ mechanism, or plant a new forest, or protect a mangrove ecosystem. It is a way of democratizing climate change solutions. And so this is a summary just of what I was talking about. So there is a net that is needed. Decarbonization will reach a point in 2050, hopefully, where we have remaining emissions still. The things we produce, the things we eat, the things we use every day, they will have emissions in them. So how do we then get to this 0 point? How do we then change this? Carbon markets are a way to do this. You've decarbonized your manufacturing process, your vehicles are all electric, you're all eating healthy food. There is still emissions, so how do you get to this net zero? There are available solutions today, and we're going to talk about them. It's carbon markets. Mr. Hong, you mentioned earlier that there are a number of different schemes around the world. I think you used the figure 25%. 25% of global emissions are already covered under some form of scheme, whether that is a ETS, as you mentioned earlier, or a carbon tax. And this number is growing. Here in Taiwan, you have policies as well. I live in Singapore, and in Singapore there are currently 3 different policies that are all being discussed and worked on to put an actual carbon tax in place. And as you rightly pointed out, these mostly form 2 functions: an emissions trading function and a carbon tax function. So the emissions trading function is we have a carbon budget, and every year we reduce our carbon budget. And in doing so, then we are putting a price on those emissions, and it creates a demand and supply dynamic. I think you explained it better than I can. So I won't spend too long on carbon emissions trading. Carbon tax is also a way of having a fixed price on carbon for everyone. It's a flat tax, and the outcomes are not always defined. So we don't always know where that money is going. Usually it goes into a state treasury, a government treasury, and then they spend it on initiatives domestically to reduce the emissions of the country. And today's focus for me will be really carbon markets. So how can we, as I said earlier, go beyond this? Carbon markets put a price on actual avoidance and removal of emissions. So we have the REDD+ projects that you discussed, but there are countless other projects. Developing renewable energy facilities in developing countries, changing families from polluting cooking facilities to clean ones, improving energy efficiency in manufacturing. We also now have carbon credits that put a price on early retirement of coal factories. So when you're producing electricity from coal, there is now a way to put a price and get paid to retire those early. And as I said earlier, it optimizes the system. So I work with businesses every day who tell me we have a carbon budget. We want to put this towards our net zero commitment. Where can we spend it? And together we work on projects that for them are important. So they want to protect biodiversity, they want to employ women, they want to help local communities, whatever their priorities. But also it optimizes that budget. I can help them identify projects that for them have the highest climate returns, which is a completely different dynamic to financial returns. We're now thinking about the same thing, but in hard avoidance and removal of CO2. We can really optimize that. And it can be used by the private and public sector. So I work with governments and businesses, and as I said, everyone in this room can participate. You know, we can all start to put a little bit of budget towards these climate initiatives. Our companies can all start doing that, and so can our governments. Right? So this works across. And carbon markets also feed into other mechanisms. So in a carbon tax system, we can actually start providing visibility on outcomes. In Singapore has a carbon tax. The carbon tax will come to the government, and the government will invest in projects in carbon markets. Right? They will then be able to show you exactly where your money has gone as a taxpayer. For an emissions trading system, we can actually have diversified units that we're trading. So Corsia is a great example of this, where the aviation industry is basically going to trade emissions, but it's also going to be allowed to invest in projects in carbon markets. So we can also start providing visibility and diversification of where we are spending money. We also have, in this instance, we have Japan. Japan has a voluntary market. So there are about 700 companies in Japan who have voluntarily said we are going to reduce our emissions every year in an emissions trading scheme. So every year they have a budget, a carbon budget, and it is reduced. And Japan has decided, well, what we are going to do is we're going to be very aggressive. We're going to go very low every year, push companies to decarbonize as fast as possible. Now, some companies won't be able to do this, but if they don't do that, they will be able to buy carbon credits. They'll be able to participate in carbon markets to meet the gap that they have. And in those carbon markets, this is the Sylvera registry, which is the largest global registry for carbon projects, and this gives you an idea of how many projects are around the world for Vera alone. And as you can tell, the Asia-Pacific region has a lot of projects. These are your neighbors. Your neighbors are developing these projects. Your neighbors have these projects and they're looking for finance. You also have a large number of projects in Africa and Latin America. What's interesting is in Asia Pacific, we've got a lot of renewable energy, right? So Asia is still the largest user of coal and emissions intensive fuels. So there's a real opportunity there for renewable energy development. And what I mentioned earlier about the best climate returns, if we can transition Asia away from coal in the next decade or two, that will have a huge impact, right? And that will have a huge impact on being able to reduce the emissions of the continent. So your neighbors are developing these projects. And anyone who Googles those projects will find quickly that it's bad news, as projects are phantom, projects are fake, there's greenwashing. You Google these, every time this is what you get. And lots of the major brands around the world, they went out and they said, we're going to be carbon neutral. They were proud of what they were doing. And instead, they're now cautious. They're now changing their minds because we get criticized for this quite a lot. But that's not always the case. So Sylvera, we specialize in helping companies verify the quality of their projects. So you come to us and you say, hey, we have a budget and we want to spend money on protecting forests. We want to spend money on renewable energy. Can you help us verify the quality of these projects? We rate them, we give them a score, AAA to D, AAA being fantastic, and D being a junk credit, a very bad quality credit. The newspaper clippings that I showed you earlier, they make you believe that all projects are in this category here. In truth, as you can see, we have lots of projects here that are highest quality. This is mixed quality, and this is the low quality here. You'll be happy to see, Mr. Chong. Red Plus, excellent, excellent, excellent. There are some excellent projects out there. So we came to exist because businesses were getting criticized. They get in the newspapers, they got criticized, greenwashing, and they needed someone that could prove that these projects are good. And so that's what we did. This is a simplification. There's obviously a lot more detail, but this is a simplification of the number of projects we have and their quality. We also did a study on companies that participate in carbon markets. So companies that do buy carbon credits. These are airlines, these are manufacturing companies, oil and gas companies. We surveyed them, and we found that the ones that are buying carbon credits, that are putting a budget to carbon projects, they are decarbonizing faster. 6.2% every year emissions reductions from those businesses. The companies that we evaluated that were not buying carbon credits, they were decarbonizing slower. And what this means is that if you have a budget for carbon credits, if you have a budget and you put money towards your net zero target, and you put it now, you will decarbonize faster than your competitors, faster than your neighbors. We did that with only 100 companies, a small study in May. Trove Research and Ecosystem Marketplace then did larger surveys, and they found the same thing. Companies are nearly 2 times faster at decarbonizing. And at the moment, when we look at the number of companies that are actually participating in carbon markets, we're still here. We're still at early adopters. Yeah, there are only a few hundred companies that are actually doing this in a big way. But soon we're going to see an early majority. So we're going to start seeing companies' 2025 and 2030 targets coming up. As a business, you should have a 2050 target, and it's advised that you have an intermediate target, a 2025, 2030 target. we are here at the moment where a number of companies are going to start having to participate, are going to have to start putting budget towards net zero. As I mentioned earlier, it means that they will decarbonize faster, and it means that they will adapt to the net zero economy much quicker if they are participating. And there's guidance. You're not alone. It's confusing and it's a difficult market out there, but there is guidance for companies. So for businesses that need to decarbonize and have a net zero target, they have these two organizations, Science-Based Targets Initiative and VCMI. They are going to be able to help businesses globally in setting those targets. They actually announced an alliance at COP28, and they are now working together. So they have a single support for businesses to set net zero targets. There is also the ICVCM, the Integrity Council, and they are going to help the other side of the equation. They're going to help the project developers, the people who are actually developing these projects that you're going to buy in carbon markets. They're going to help them to make sure that they are making higher quality projects in the market. So there is guidance out there. Let me know if anyone wants introductions to these organizations. They can be really helpful for businesses to set net zero targets. They also help you with communicating that. It's quite hard to communicate to the world what your targets are. People will very quickly criticize you and say, oh, it's not perfect. Well, not every business is the same, so not every net zero target should be the same. And this is where we also come in as a company. There is also better technology being developed at the moment. So this is my colleague Miro, and this is my colleague Gab, and they are in a forest at the moment with a LiDAR camera. A LiDAR camera helps them measure biomass in a forest. So in those REDD+ projects you explained earlier, we can actually go and measure the exact carbon in those projects. We then fly our drone over the project, like this, and it measures the carbon stocks in these projects. Which means when you are actually telling the world, telling businesses, telling your customers, and telling your competitors that you are saving 1,000 tons of carbon in this forest, we can prove it and show it and actually be clear. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so you will do due diligence on each project, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's where those scores I showed you earlier, the ratings, that's where those scores come in. We give projects a quantified score. And the technology is helping us do this, right? We are able to do this with forests, but we're also able to do this with mangrove systems and blue carbon systems and farming systems, right? When it comes to non-nature-based, like renewable energy, we can also look at the quality of those projects. We don't need a drone, but we can still measure the quality of those projects and how well they are designed. So the technology is getting better, and I'm just going to give you an example of what we do. So it's a snapshot of our work. So as you saw earlier, there's this camera here that we use, and there's the drone. And what it does is it does a 3D map of each tree in a forest. Now that map, it tells me how much carbon is stored in this tree. So then when you are paying to protect it in a REDD+ project, I can tell you exactly how much carbon you are protecting and be really accurate with this. We then layer all of these trees that we've measured with other maps, and then we can have a really good estimate of the carbon that is stored in that nature. So now those greenwashing accusations that we saw earlier in the papers, they're looking a little less accurate, right? We're able to prove that the projects are good. We're able to go to the forests and actually measure them. We're starting to go into a world where each credit that you buy has been proven and it is actually good and it's actually doing something. And you can show that to your board, you can show that to your investors, you can show that to your colleagues, right? And you can be really clear and transparent about the quality of these projects. This is a summary of how a carbon credit project works. Now, there's a lot of information here, so I'm going to give you a minute. What we have here is the project. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a project can be anything. It can be protecting forests, it can be changing cooking appliances, it can be a biogas, waste management system, As long as you are avoiding emissions or removing emissions, then you can be an eligible project. That project has got implementation partners and developers that actually put it in place and actually do the work. They're the ones who actually go on the ground and they actually put things in place. You also have project finance and insurance that comes into the project that is needed. So that could be actually already, as a business, you could already be part of that. You could be the project finance, right? You could be financing this project. You could also be the landowner. If you have land and you think, oh, this would be great for reforestation, this would be great for renewable energy, you could also be involved there. So there's already involvement here. You then submit your project to a registry. And the registries are Gold Standard, Vera, all the large, the global ones, but there are also national ones, domestic ones that you can apply for. They have the credits that are checked. They're checked by a verification body, VPB. And then you have carbon credits. Now you have credits that you can sell. You can have credits that you can use. It's up to you. If you are the project financier, then sometimes the credits come back to you, like this. But usually you then try and sell those credits onto the market by marketplaces, exchanges. TCX here in Taiwan will be one of those. There will be an exchange who will be selling those credits. And then traders, brokers, your bank could be a trader as well of these credits. And then the buyer is obviously the one that actually needs these credits. They have a net zero target, and so they're going to need those credits. They also will want guidance. I showed you earlier some organizations that could support in guiding how to use the credits. They will maybe need financing. As I said, you need a budget for your net zero commitment. So either that comes as a separate entity, you go to your bank and say, I need a loan, or it comes from your business. Either way, there is financing required. And you may need insurance as well. You want to be protected against the project failing. You may also need protection against the seller not selling you the credits, right? So insurance might be needed. And you might need advice. You might need consultants and other professional services that can guide you through this process. So that's a very, very simplified schematic of how these things work. And then at Sylvera, we, as a business, we provide data for all of these components. So we scrutinize the project so that the project finance and insurance have the information about the project's quality. We then provide the data to the seller, so the seller knows what they are transacting, and obviously then the buyer. I find that helpful. And this is our mission, right? We want to make sure that every dollar is spent on real climate action, right? That's what we do. We want to make sure that happens. And for businesses in this room, for individuals in this room, this means that everything that you're spending in the carbon markets is going somewhere real and provable. And we can actually prove it, right? In the past, you couldn't do that. You had to trust. You had to trust the developer, right? You had to trust the project developer before. They would tell you, oh yes, don't worry, this project is excellent. Okay. Now you have someone like us who can actually come and prove that for you, and I can verify that and be sure. I'm going to give 2 examples of how we've worked and then wrap up. I'll be available for questions later. Here's the scenario. A European automotive company, a very, very big one, came to us and they said, hey, we're going to decide to buy $10 million of credits from a project in Cambodia. We said, okay, we have identified it. It is a REDD project, which we've referenced before. So we want to help protect this forest here. This forest here, it's not a great picture. It's an old satellite image, 2015. So this is the forest here. And they said, hey, we would like to finance, we'd like to pay the project developer to be able to protect this forest. Great, it's been registered, it's been approved by Vera, the biggest registry in the world. And they said, just check it for us, just make sure it's good. We looked at the project in 2021, so 2 years ago. And we noticed the difference here. in these two satellites. So in dark green is forest. In this brown beige color is large agriculture that has come in to the area. And this is not a small area. This is a very, very large project. And as you can see, in the 2 years, basically all of the forest has disappeared from the north part of the project, which is what we're looking at now. In total, we saw that 30% of the project had disappeared in 5 years. So why were they going to pay for it? Like, what were they going to pay for? What was the $10 million going to pay for? Well, answer is nothing. Yeah. So we then looked at this. We told them, hey, look, don't buy these credits. They are clearly junk. And they avoided spending that money. They also avoided being in the press. So after we concluded our analysis, in Q3 of the same year, so a few months later, the media found this project and denounced every buyer and said every buyer is greenwashing. So we helped our customer avoid these credits. So there's risk mitigation, right? We can help avoid the bad projects, but we can also help defend the good. This is the scenario here is a large software company in Japan came to us and they said, we like this project and we have bought credits from this project, but our biggest national newspaper in Japan is criticizing us. It is saying that the project is fake, that the project is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And can you please check this for us? So we did a rigorous analysis of the project, and we found that every single claim made by the media was based on false information. So, some of it, I think they just misunderstood the project, and some of it they were clearly just, they had an agenda, right? And this project is the highest rated projects we have. It's the best project we have found, and so we help them. We help them respond to the media criticism, but more importantly, we help them respond to their customers and to reassure their customers, look, you are working with a company that says that they are carbon neutral. We take this seriously, here's the evidence, here's the proof, and we paid Sylvera to defend our position with data and with evidence. There's a couple of examples there of the good and the bad, and how we can avoid the good, avoid the bad, and promote the good. Very big difference there. And at the end of the day, I'm an environmentalist, so of course I'm going to be here and tell everyone to finance climate. Of course I am. But also, for these businesses, these are decisions that impact their share price, they impact their the relationship they have with their investors and their customers. So these have real world impacts beyond just climate, right? So I hope this has been helpful. I hope this has been helpful in understanding the context where we are and how we think that we can continue to invest in climate, continue to invest in nature. And as I said earlier, everyone can participate in these carbon markets. There are apps on your phone that mean that even you as individuals can start doing it. You can offset your coffee in the morning. And as a business then, you also have your net zero targets. This is a really efficient way of doing this and starting to put a price on carbon. So I hope it's been helpful, and I'm available for any questions you may have. And thank you very much.
Yeah. 要不要看一下他有没有什么问题？就是开放有。
我们现在开放2分钟现场提问。对，然后因为各位贵宾们的台前其实都有一个麦克风座，只要把它打开来，对，我们就会全场 spotlight 到您的身上提问。
不用紧张，不用紧张，廖博士多紧张。
那我们开放2个问题好了。好，那我们的廖博士。
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's really great. And I would like to, you mentioned that we have an early retirement from the fire power points. So you have a credit for that. So is Vera or Gold Standard or any other form or so the methodology?
Yeah. So
whose methodology that is?
Yeah, it's so the Singapore government have written a guide on how to do this. And they are working with Vera to do a methodology that will be complete next year.
Next year.
Yeah, so Vera is doing one, and I believe Gold Standard may do one as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
谢谢我们廖博士。那我们再开放一个，哦，有，那个前面麦克风就可以打开来了
Hello, Louis. I know that you guys will do constant monitoring on the projects in order to give the ratings, right? How about for those places that you are not able to do monitoring? What are the solutions? Or you just don't give, you are unable to give them a better rating because of this issue?
Yeah, it's availability of live data is a big challenge that we have. So a lot of the monitoring we do is actually done with satellite observation, so we can observe the projects from space. That's not easy everywhere. There are some countries where there's cloud cover all the time, and you just cannot see the project. So the way we do that, the way we try and tackle this, is we change how we look at projects. So if you're over Peru, for example, Peru is a country that has so many clouds because of the Andes Mountains. Now, we'll never be able to develop enough imagery so that we can see through the cloud. But what we can do is we can change the type of satellite that we use. So now instead of putting a photo of that project, a picture, we are doing radar scanning. So we are just using a different type of imagery. And it means then that instead of looking at a project with a nice picture, that you can see here, for example, it's a nice photograph, we're looking at it with radar, which is a completely different way of observing a project. So we have to innovate, is the answer to your question. We have to find innovative solutions to be able to monitor those projects. That's for nature-based, and so I'm confident that for nature-based we can actually monitor most projects. Where we actually struggle are community projects. So there are projects where we are switching people from a small, dirty cooking appliance to a clean cooking appliance. How do I know from my desk in Singapore that the community in Tanzania is using those cook stoves? That's really hard monitoring to do. And that is, again, being changed through innovation, through monitoring systems on the ground, IoT systems on the ground, where you can actually start to monitor people's activities. So the answer to your question is, we are innovating new solutions to do better monitoring, but today it's not perfect. I'm not going to stand here and tell you we see all projects in the world. It's not true. We can see most projects, and then for those that we cannot, we are trying to innovate and find new solutions to monitor them.
Thank you.
Yeah.